think we'll just quickly do the introductions and then we'll get started because we've got quite a tight time scale today. So I'm Andy Steele, I'm one of the directors at 360 and I'll be talking about tax today with a nod towards coronavirus. Tony?
Hi, my name is Tony Bowler and I run a premier business club called the Business Culture Hull, and I'll be talking about being positive through coronavirus, connecting with people still, and also marketing and being positive with your marketing still.
Thank you, Tony. Sheila?
Hello, I'm Sheila Hudson of the HR Department, East Yorkshire. I'm going to be talking today about the flexible furlough arrangements, preparing employees to come back to work, and also re-energising your team and possibly looking at restructuring going forward.
Thank you. Andrew?
Hi, I'm Andrew Bradley. I'm from the Humber Business Growth Hub. We're an organisation that's European funded and designed to try and help businesses grow and thrive in the Humber area. I'll be talking to you today about various grants and grant funding that's available.
Thank you, Andrew. And our final panellist today is Sean.
Good afternoon. My name's Sean Maloney. I'm from 360 and I'll be just giving a bit of a refresher on the current funding sources out there for businesses during the current situation. It's kind of what I do on a daily basis, as well as looking after a portfolio of clients.
And then finally, we've got Chloe, who's essentially our host today.
Hi, everyone.
Chloe will be running PowerPoint and also keeping an eye out for any questions that anybody has. So as I said earlier, please feel free to ask any questions on the chat. Although we will be doing a Q&A session from 10 to 5 till 5 at the end of the meeting. And I'm sure the panellists will be happy to hang around for 5 minutes after that if there's a deluge of questions. So Chloe, do you want to start sharing the screen?
Yeah.
So I'm starting off and I'm going to be talking about tax. Most of the things I'm going to talk about today are applicable at all times really, but probably even more applicable at the moment given the struggles and the challenges that many businesses are encountering. First thing I wanted to talk about was time to pay. It's something the government introduced right at the start of the pandemic stroke lockdown. And I guess the biggest concession they've given to date is the ability to defer your VAT payment that fell due between the 20th of March and the 30th of June to April 21. And I know a lot of businesses took advantage of that, even if perhaps they didn't need to, because they were worried about how long the lockdown might continue, etc. How available would funding be during that period? And all you really had to do to apply for that was cancel your direct debit. As I said, that VAT quarter is now payable in April 21, so the start of Q2 next year. Around the same time, they also announced that taxpayers wouldn't need to pay their 31st of July self-assessment payment on account until 31st of January 21. Really, it was aimed at self-employed individuals that had been affected by coronavirus, but you didn't have to apply to have your payment deferred. All you needed to do effectively was not make the payment, and that payment is now payable 31st of January 21, along with your balancing payment and first payment on account for next year. Other taxes that you can apply to defer are other VAT periods after the period that I mentioned earlier, corporation tax and pay as you earn. HMRC are being really helpful, to be fair. normally when you ask for time to pay, you have to jump through all sorts of hoops, you know, prove that you haven't been able to get the funding from elsewhere, etc. But all they're really asking for at the moment is an idea of when you will be able to pay it, and they're asking you to set up a direct debit. So anybody that needs to defer additional VAT payments, corporation tax or pay as you earn needs to ring the time to pay helpline. The phone number is 0800 024 1222. I suppose the concern about this time to pay arrangement is there's going to be a lot of tax payable in the first 3 or 4 months of next year, on top of the, you know, their ordinary tax payments. And if businesses have taken out bounce back loans or Sybil's loans, the first payments for those are going to be due sort of Q2 2021. So we may see some businesses experiencing cash flow problems at those times. So that's something to be aware of. The VAT reduction for businesses in hospitality and tourism was quite heavily publicised. These measures were announced on the 8th of July. Basically, they've reduced the VAT rate from 20% to 5% for businesses in hospitality and tourism. So basically, people that are eating food inside restaurants, pubs, etc., or are buying hot takeaway food, the VAT rate is reduced from 20 to 5%. Also applies to non-alcoholic drinks, accommodations such as hotels, and attractions such as amusement, fairgrounds, amusements, etc. Some businesses are passing those savings on to their customers. Others are keeping the savings for themselves to help them pay for the extra costs involved with being COVID secure and social distancing. They've also reduced the rates for businesses on the flat rate scheme. So that's something to keep an eye out for when businesses do their first VAT return, covering the period of the reduction. The reduction started 15th of July and ends 12th of January next year. Next thing to have a think about is making sure you're claiming all the reliefs that you're entitled to. That advice, you know, is always applicable. But right now, you know, with businesses, some businesses finding it tough, it's really important that they're claiming all the reliefs that they're entitled to. Things that businesses often miss out or don't know about are capital allowances on property. You can go back a number of years to make those claims. Research and development. We have a research and development department at 360 that are really good at identifying, qualifying activities that perhaps businesses didn't think they would qualify for. You know, an R&D claim can give your business a real cash boost, which can be a real godsend at times like these. And another relief that we see a lot of businesses miss out on or not claim, particularly when they do their own payroll, is what's known as the employment allowance. It's basically a grant from the government of £4,000. It was £3,000 last year. It's essentially a cash back on your employer's national insurance liabilities. There's a box you have to tick in your payroll software to make sure you claim it. Lost count of the number of non-payroll clients that I've seen that have failed to claim that. So it's a good idea to check that you have claimed it. And you can also go back a few years as well if you have missed it. So potentially there's, you know, several £1,000s there that your business could be entitled to. Any business or charity whose employer's national insurance liabilities were less than £100,000 last year can claim it. Also, make sure you're claiming your capital gains tax annual exemption of £12,300. Are you sat on some shares or other assets that you could potentially sell tax-free? Do you have any savings that could potentially be moved over to an ISA, which is tax-free? And also make sure that if you've paid any statutory sick pay to people suffering from coronavirus, you're claiming the SSP rebate. A lot of businesses' turnover has reduced over these last few months, so it may be that you now qualify for cash accounting for VAT. Cash accounting means that you pay the VAT over on your sales when you receive the cash rather than when you raise the invoice. So it's really good for cash flow, but it's also really helpful to any businesses that are incurring bad debts at the moment. And if your turnover's dropped below 150, you might want to have a look at the flat rate scheme for VAT, because there are certain sectors or certain businesses that can save some quite significant amounts by being on the flat rate scheme rather than the standard scheme. If you have incurred bad debts, make sure you're claiming the VAT relief on those bad debts. Doesn't apply if you're on cash accounting because you don't pay the VAT over until the customer's actually paid you. But if you're on standard accounting, you can claim the VAT back on those bad debts once the payment is 6 months late. And then you can also get corporation tax or income tax relief on those bad debts in the period that you became aware that that debt became bad. Next, sometimes it's a good idea to shorten your business's year end, particularly if it's a loss-making period, because what you can do then is you can carry those losses back against profits from previous years, generate a tax refund, and delay the tax on the when you return to profit after lockdown. You can delay the payment of that tax by shortening your year end. So that's something that's worth exploring and discussing with your accountant or business advisor. Another little tip is that the government grants that have been available recently, for example, the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme grants, although it covers the period March, April, May, some of which falls into the last tax year, HMRC have said that you don't need to pay tax on it until the following tax year, which is a little cash flow boost. Rather than allocating the grant part to last year, part to this year, you can allocate it all to this year. And also, if you've received the 10 or 25k grant from the government, just have a think about what period that actually covers, and is it beneficial to defer some of it into the next accounting period? That's something else that you really need to be talking to your accountant about. Running out of time now, so I'm going to whiz through the last three. Making tax digital too. That applies to VAT registered businesses that have registered voluntarily because the turnover is less than 85k. Now, we did think making tax digital was coming in for these businesses 1st of April 2020, but because of coronavirus, that's been delayed to the 1st of April 21, which is good news for businesses that aren't yet using cloud software, etc. But they do need to start thinking about moving over to those in the very near future. Some more good news was that the construction industry VAT reverse charge was delayed. It was supposed to come in October 19. It got delayed because of Brexit, but now it's been delayed because of coronavirus to March 21. So that affects contractors and subcontractors within the construction sector. If that applies to you and you're not really up to speed with what those changes are, then please get in touch with us. Finally, stamp duty was reduced on the 8th of July. The previous threshold was 125,000. That was increased to 500,000 in order to stimulate the residential property market. They reckon the average bill will drop by £4,500. Second properties are still subject to the 3% surcharge. Property market seems to be doing really well at the moment because there's a lot of people who have discovered they don't like the houses that they live in. They perhaps are no longer commuting into work, so they're looking for perhaps houses in the countryside, etc. So property market's doing really well, and hopefully that'll continue. I'm going to shut up now and move over to the next person, who is Chloe.
It should be me, I think.
Sure.
Thank you, Sandy. Yeah, so as I said at my introduction, just a little bit about the funding options that are available and still out there in order to support people through current lockdown. So you can see, to start off with, we've got the Corona Business Interruption Loan Scheme, which was the government's first stab at providing support to businesses. Still very much available. In fact, the deadline was the 30th of September to get your applications in, and this has now been extended to the 30th of November, which obviously gives a couple of months additional time to get applications in. Still looking at quite a large turnaround time, probably about 8 weeks. So probably looking at a deadline application for the 30th of September, really, to make sure you've got everything in place to stop people scrabbling around, to make sure you've got a good chance of getting loans. In terms of the levels of loans, the loans are very much in the vein of the Enterprise Finance Guarantee Scheme, which allowed certain securities by the government. In terms of the levels in CBILS, anything up to £250,000 requires no PG, so we've seen quite a lot of clients, quite a lot of people looking at that sort of level in order to secure the funding that they need to go forward. There's probably upwards of 25 plus providers in this market. Don't necessarily have to go to your own incumbent bank, but it does help because they'll understand you more by going to your incumbent bank. But they are outside providers. Slight difference is that your incumbent bank and the mainstream banks, the lending levels and the loan interest levels are a lot less than they are in some of the other lenders. You're looking at around about 3.5% to 4% for the mainstream banks, anywhere up to 8-9% if you're looking at outside of those funders. However, in terms of the mainstream banks, they've become a lot more stringent in what you need to provide and what you have going forward. I've had a couple of conversations with some of the mainstream banks who are requiring full business plans and then going forward management information that they can scrutinise going forward. Slightly less stringent are the alternative funders who don't require a lot of that information, but as I said, the rates are certainly a lot higher than compared to the mainstream banks. I guess the watchword on this is the deadline's extending to 30th of November, but because of the turnaround time, people need to look at applications now. We've supported people to put these together, or even sense checked what people have done. Andrew, in his section, will probably mention a little bit about some of the funding that's available, some of the grants that are available in order to get some professional service to look at these, but I won't steal his thunder. So the next one is bounce backs. This was
Sean, just before you move on, they're all interest-free for the first 12 months, aren't they?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, they're all interest-free for the first 12 months, and repayments are held, as you mentioned in your slot. So there's no payments to go out, but obviously you need to look at the levels of funding going forward and have some sort of business plan, or at least some recognition of how the repayments are going to kick in and cause you and impact on your cash flow going forward. So with bounce backs, that was the second level of funding that came out from the government, and these were the ones that were capped at 50,000, but were dependent on your turnover. So the maximum you can lend was up to 25% of the turnover. Unlike the CBILS, the bounce back loans were mainly aimed at your incumbent bank in order for you to make the application. That simplified a lot of the application process. So going direct to your bank was probably the best chance. There are some other providers that have come in where they will take non-clients, although that's not going to save you a lot of time, because a lot of these banks have become full up and they've actually waiting lists. So switching from your incumbent bank to another provider to try and jump the queue, what I found is not really working. Slight issue with the dealing with the applications is that the application process is taken care of by a separate team. So contacting your relationship manager or your bank manager with issues about the bounce back loan, if you haven't received it, doesn't always get you to the right place. what I will say about bounce out loans, it's probably the cheapest money, unsecured money that's ever been released. 2.5% over the life of the loan is unbelievably cheap money. So even if you need it going forward in terms of looking at future purchases of equipment or future marketing plans, it's probably the best sort of funds that are out there in order to supplement any growth plans going forward. And the deadline for the applications of this is the 4th of November. Generally speaking, the application process has been fairly straightforward, 15-20 minutes. It's just the follow-up in terms of getting the money or providing further information where we're seeing is the kind of blockage that's going through. And the next thing I've put on the slide is the self-employed income support scheme, which is the second round. The first round was released in in July. This is the second round, which is 70% of the average profits 3 months, so that's capped at £2,190 a month. And applications for these need to be in by the 19th of October. Again, this is driven straight through the HMRC website, and it's very much a self application for this, but it is subject to HMRC checks, and a lot of the issues of this has been whether you're eligible or not, and which a lot of it is controlled by HMRC. The next thing that we've got is about assets. What I've put on there is, generally speaking, if you've got assets within the business that haven't got any lending on it, or normally called unencumbered assets, there are a lot of lenders that are looking to lend against assets as a security base. On top of the CBILS and bank bounce backs, which aren't secured, there are lenders out there that will do secured lending. So if you've got assets where you've got no lending against, there is still the ability to get funds against it. Particularly with debtors, there's a process called invoice financing, where you can effectively sell your debtors to a funder who will pay you in advance of your customers paying you. Prevalent in industries and sectors where there's a big gap between how quickly customers pay you and how quickly you have to pay suppliers. A lot of transport companies use this because of the fuel being on 14 days and some customers not paying for 60 days. So this is an area where a lot of funders are operating in. And the main slight drawbacks on this is that it does mean you lose a percentage of your margin on your sales, but it does mean you get your money quicker. And the other thing in terms of assets, if you've got any property or any equipment that haven't got any lending on, there are asset-backed lenders out there that will look at releasing funds against the valuation of your assets. Clearly, the issue with the current environment is the valuation that's placed on your assets. Certainly, a lot of COVID-19 valuations are out there from valuers. So what you got probably before COVID in terms of valuation of assets, it's probably been shrunk a little bit, but again, there is an availability to release cash that may be tied up in an asset. Again, with the main thing of this will be the funder's proof of can you cover the repayments, which will be the other key. And then going on to grants, I'll lightly touch on the grants. There's grants out there to support businesses that are growing, also businesses that need some support during the lockdown, or new businesses, but I'll let Andrew talk more about that. There's the grants that are available for employment. There's the new employment enterprise apprenticeship schemes available for 16 to 24-year-olds, where you can get up to £3,000 worth of funding, and then 25 and plus apprenticeships, which is £2,000 worth of funding. And then there's the Kickstarter scheme, which I believe starts in September, which covers 16 to 24-year-olds that are either on universal credit or in danger of being long-term unemployed, where the businesses that employ them can get 25 hours at minimum wage a week covered by the government for up to 6 months. So you look at supporting employment. So there's a few areas where if you're looking to employ people, there's some grants out there. And the final grant I'll touch on is just the green home owner grants, which are available. Slightly a little bit of detail lacking in this, but this is a grant to cover changes to your housing to make them more energy efficient. Also includes landlords, so any landlords out there with buy-to-let portfolios, this is a grant available out there. It's based on a voucher scheme, and the vouchers are available for nominated tradespeople, where you could get up to 2/3 of the work funded. The tradespeople have to be registered with either Trustmark or the Micro Generation Certification Scheme. So you can't use every trader. They've got to be under those schemes. Sorry, and it's split into two sources: primary and secondary measures. But how it's capped is it's capped at whatever the primary spend is. So the primary cost will be installation and low carbon heating systems, the installation of those. So for example, if you had £1,000 worth of grant on that primary spend, you can only get £1,000 on the secondary. The secondary spend is around about draft proofing measures and energy efficiency. In terms of following up with that, that can be found. There's more advice that's found on the Simple Energy Advice Service, which is called SEE. And how the process works is that there's vouchers issued ahead of the work, and then you can go on with the work. Yeah, thanks, Tony. As I said, it starts in September, but going on to the Simple Energy Advice website gives you a bit more information how to apply. There's also a HMRC guidance on it, which I can send you or anybody a copy of, which just breaks it down into what's eligible and what costs are there and how you apply for it. So that's me. That's my slot, I think. Over to Sheila, I believe, next.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for that. I'm going to start with the flexible furlough scheme, which came in on the 1st of July. Just recap what the employer has been able to do and take advantage of. It allowed an employer to bring staff back for any amount of time in any shift pattern, and it's proved extremely popular. And under the scheme, it allowed for a mix to enable the needs of the business to be met. Under the job retention scheme, enabled the employer to use it to claim for employees serving a statutory or contractual notice period. Now, bearing in mind the statutory notice period is a week, and the contractual notice period can be anything up to, well, if you get a service contract, it can be 12 months. We had an inquiry where a client rang HMRC and they had a claim turned down because it was a 12-week notice period on the contract. I think Andy alluded earlier to say that HMRC have actually been, quite helpful. This is also new to HMRC, which I think we're forgetting at times because some of the advice is a bit, what I call a bit like knitting fog. I rang HMRC and I found they were right to question it. But the point I made to HMRC was, in the spirit of the ACAS Code of Practice, where it says the longer you put somebody on notice, the more opportunity there is actually of potentially avoiding a redundancy. They took the point on board and they've allowed the claim to go through. So I think it is about seeking advice, to talk to your accountant, talk to your HR advisor. That is what it's about. The employer can also enforce holiday entitlement during notice period on furlough, but it is subject to the contract of employment allowing for that to happen, or reasonable notice. What's reasonable notice? But it's actually double the amount of time that you're asking the employee to take. You're asking an employee to take 2 days notice, 2 days holiday, beg your pardon, during a notice period. It's actually 6 days, because if you're asking them to take 2 days, you need to give them 4 days notice. 2 days isn't part of the 4 days. It's then 6 days. So it's just something to bear in mind. What we wouldn't want is a breach of contract, which can then slip into, some of these situations, which just muddies the waters, unfortunately. For the next slide, thank you. What the employer cannot do is use the grant to substitute redundancy payments. That guidance is very, very clear. So you cannot claim a subsidy on a redundancy payment. The statutory redundancy payment, it is what it is. It's for the employer to pay. The employer equally cannot place an employee on furlough simply for a period of holiday. They have to evidence that there is not a pattern of just abusing furlough for the fact of holiday. They have to show that there is a pattern where they are exercising flexibility in terms of the spirit of the flexible furlough scheme. Otherwise, they will question how genuine the claim is. The employer is advised not to use the scheme where reasonable foreseeability exists that using the scheme will not save a job. So if the employer has knowledge that the jobs are at risk, and by keeping them on furlough, it's not going to save a job, but what they're trying to do is just use the scheme to extend service and perhaps work with the employee, because as quite as often has been said to me, I feel sorry for them. So the longer I can keep them earning and get a subsidy for that, the better. I understand it. However, it's not in the spirit of the scheme. And what we don't know is when HMRC start to inspect these claims, I believe, and my colleagues believe, they will be extremely thorough. So if the evidence exists that there is reasonable foreseeability that those jobs would not have existed by keeping somebody on furlough, it's quite possible that HMRC will say we want our subsidy back. So it's something to consider. Guidance on record keeping. This has been very clearly stated. It wasn't initially, but it is now. The guidance clearly states that employers should keep a copy of all records now for 6 years. That includes, in relation to employees, the employer flexibly furloughed records of usual hours worked, including any calculations that were required, and the actual hours worked, which would obviously be different because of the flexible furlough scheme. So if you flexibly furlough employees, you'll need to agree this with the employee and keep a new written agreement that confirms the new furlough arrangements. Our advice, and we suggest to seek advice on this, is not to get a new agreement every time you flexibly furlough somebody, but get an agreement in place that affords you that flexibility to opt in and opt out to reduce the administration of it all. So what flexible furlough arrangements are possible? We could just flip, that's great, thank you. So the employer can continue to fully furlough employees if they wish, that still stands. The employers, they do not need to place all their employees on furlough. What we should consider there though is if they're not all on furlough, there should be a fair system if there is a rota, because that can create a split, particularly if it's seen to be unfairly afforded in terms of those that are working, because obviously if there's an 80% salary only for the furloughed employees, they're going to be disadvantaged. Flexible furlough arrangements, they can last any amount of time. It doesn't have to be a week, it doesn't have to be 3 weeks. They can stay on furlough. Employees, they can enter into a flexible furlough agreement more than once. Talked about that, opt in, opt out. And employees cannot undertake any work for the employer during the time that the employer records them as being on furlough. And we've had numerous questions. Actually, it's the same question, but asked in a different way about whether their employees can carry out work for the employer. I am sitting here believing that there is some work carried out for some companies by their employees, and the employer probably believes that it doesn't qualify, but I also believe that once the inspections take place by HMRC, and I firmly believe that will happen, employees are just going to be transparent about what they have done during their time on furlough, and what their employers have asked them to do. And if it's brought into question, then the claim period falls apart. So our advice is just no work unless it's training, and then they get paid for that. So what's it costing the employer? We all know from the 1st of August, the employers are having to pay the employees' national insurance contributions and pension contributions, and they can no longer be claimed. So from the 1st of September, the employers now got the 10% contribution of salary because they're required to top up the 80%. From the 1st of October, the government are going to only reimburse 60% of salary. So the employers then got the 20% contribution. And possibly, I think we're going to find more and more companies starting to consider whether this is now affordable. I think there's perhaps some changes again going to happen in terms of the needs of the business that we're going to see happening. Also got to remember during this time that flexible furlough, employees are still accruing continuous employment, they're still accruing their holidays. So it is all additional costs. If at the end of this scheme, which has got an expiry date to it, the employer hasn't been able to save the job. So what's the return to work best practice? And, you know, we have to positively believe that, you know, people are going to come back to work. Our experience has shown there's been quite what we call a change curve. We saw a definite pattern emerge earlier following lockdown, and we've described it as, you know, this sort of shock initially at the spread of COVID and the lockdown, and then there was a bit of denial, and then anger crept in. We then saw quite a lot of cases of anxiety and depression, and we're now seeing an upward curve, and it's more about acceptance now. And for us, what we're talking to our clients about, and I believe other companies are experiencing this, it's about employees are moving on gradually. It is very gradually. It's sometimes not as at the same pace as the employer is wanting to move on, and we have a bit of a disparity there. But there is signs that employees are now understanding that there is a new norm there. Best practice for returning to work. It is a new norm, and our view is that communication is the new norm, because people have changed through this process, and it's important we don't lose sight of that. I think it's got lost a bit along the way that people might not be the same again through either personal experiences or their own health, or just their view of life in general, or their ability to balance work and life, work and personal life. Communication's key. Understandably, there are well-being of individuals is key, and if that's ignored, it's going to manifest itself and show itself in other ways. Physical health and safety issues that need addressing, that's not just HR advisors or employment lawyers talking. This is now government advice to enable employees to feel they're working in a COVID-safe environment. Risk assessment, social distancing, hygiene, PPE. It affects anybody that goes off-site to work, visitors. It's about training employees, consulting and informing and communicating. Home working. Our experience at the moment is showing that initially it works well, and it does work well for a lot of people, but there are some it's not working well for, that they need social interaction, and it is affecting the employment relationship. So how can we re-energise the team when, you know, we have got these underlying issues? There are genuine health and safety concerns from people. It could be that an employer can never go far enough to reassure the employee. but tapping into staff, into their knowledge, into their skills as well, bring them on board. Our advice to companies is don't try and do it all yourself. Bring them on board, let them generate ideas in terms of what would make them feel safe. The work we're doing at the moment, a lot of it is about companies that are saying, right, this is the time to look at how we've been doing it in the past. It doesn't fit the way we work now. In fact, we've had a lot of companies, and I do mean a lot, that have said, okay, I've still got, hypothetically, 20% of my people on furlough. I'm now back to the same manufacturing capacity. And what I'm finding is that I'm manned up now. I don't need the 20%, so I don't know what I was doing before I was furloughed. So people are working in a different way. I've not quite got all the answers to that, but companies are looking at working leaner, there's no doubt about it. Business goals and objectives, our view is review them. Other cost reduction options, just moved on. If looking at the needs of the business, if a potential restructure and re-energising isn't working for the business, other cost reduction measures might be necessary. This has to be a realistic option. Redundancies have to be, a possibility, particularly if there is a local lockdown, a second wave, can't discount it. Furlough will end on the 31st of October. None of us can predict what will happen, but redundancies it's about the process. It's a statutory redundancy. Voluntary pay cuts, voluntary hours reductions, voluntary unpaid leave and layoff. Our advice is please seek advice to, if you're considering implementing any of those cost reduction options, seek the right advice at the right time. Otherwise it could go quite wrong and harm the business more. And that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Sheila. We could have spent a whole 2 or 3 hours on HR issues right now, I'm sure. So well done for cramming all of that into slightly over 10 minutes. I think the point about businesses perhaps working more efficiently with less people is a really important point, and something I'm sure lots of our clients will be looking at over the course of the next few months. And with regards to the home working, I think 360 have found that it's worked really well, perhaps with the exception of sort of trainees, apprentices, and maybe the people that were new to our organisation just before lockdown. They weren't quite used to our systems and processes yet. So, I'm foreseeing a future where perhaps younger people are in the office a lot more, but the more experienced people are perhaps home working on a part-time basis, and I'm sure lots of other business owners are thinking along those lines as well. So thank you for that, Sheila. Now we'll move over to Andrew.
Thanks, Andy, and hi everybody. I'm Andrew Bradley, and I work for the Humber Business Growth Hub, which is part of the Grow My SME programme. We're here to try and help businesses survive and thrive during pre and post lockdown. If we can move on to the next slide, it'll give you a little bit of a background of what we do. Thank you. Sorry. Right. We were established in 2018, and before lockdown, we'd helped people source £2.5 million worth of local grant funds, and to attract £11 million worth of capital or equity. I rounded it up a little bit there and rounded it down a little bit. We knocked off the few pounds and pence that were that went alongside those numbers just to keep it tight and sharp. But as you can see, since we went into lockdown, government have absolutely come to the fore and really tried to assist businesses wherever possible. And the team that I'm part of has managed to help businesses access over 120 million of £20 million of central government grant support in a range of grants from the 2, 3, 5 and 10s through to the 25s, and then some special grants on top of that as well. So that just gives you a background of where we are. But going forward, it's what grants are out there now for everybody. The first one I'll start with is the Finance for Growth grant. I work for the Finance for Growth team, so that's why it's number 1 on the list. We're here to help businesses to prepare to find capital, to prepare to gain access to capital and investment. And our grant can be used for a whole host of things, in addition to the traditional business plans and financial forecasts. It can be used to obtain management information, marketing consultancy, ISO accreditations, etc. Our grant values, well, we can do a grant of between £1,000 and £5,000. It's a 40% intervention rate, so that means that we can cover projects of between £2,500 and £12,500 before that. Moving on. Business Growth Support, that's my sister program. As you can see, there's a lot of similarities between ourselves. They can do, it's exactly the same format, exactly the same way, same values, but they can do things around business productivity, efficiency, employment, sales growth, development of new products, etc. There's quite a few uses for that one, and you can use both of these grants in conjunction with each other. So it's not one or the other. You can actually apply for both. Moving on again. As I promised, this will be a whistle-stop tour of everything that we can, of some of the top grants that are out there at the moment. A new one that's just been launched, Growing Hull and East Yorkshire, the local enterprise partnership, the LEP and their grant. It's £1.5 million worth of funding. Grants, as you can see there, between £5,000 and £250,000. This one is linked to employment, so it's about either creating jobs or safeguarding jobs. It can be used for a whole host of things, but the key ones that seem to be successful are support with purchase of plant and machinery to make your business more efficient or to actually expand. Other types of equipment, refurb of your premises. So if you need to refurb to squeeze another machine in, or to make it more efficient, or to accommodate some sort of ISO accreditation, then all that can be covered off in there. There is some leeway for ICT requirements, etc., but that would be on a discussion basis. The key elements, as I say, plant machinery, other equipment, refurbishment. It's linked to job creation or job safeguarding. The rest of the information on the slide is about the percentage that you can actually, the size of the grant that you can receive. But again, we would go through that with you on a case-by-case basis, because it depends on the size of your business and where you're located in the region as to how much support that they're able to offer. The next one, the next slide is just some sample grants of the other grants that are available. Government have launched a £20 million business recovery grant. That one, this region's been allocated a share of funds, and that should go live in early September. That particular grant is designed for businesses that have been severely impacted by COVID and the lockdown, or were unfortunate and were one of the few areas that missed support. That grant is going to be 100% funding, and it's up to £3,000. So it's another great one for businesses to apply for. The team are accepting early expressions of interest, and once it goes live, they will make contact with the individual businesses to go through the application process. kickstart tourism. Tourism has been heavily impacted by lockdown, and grant support needed to be a little, they need extra grant support. So again, central government have come through with a separate grant for tourist businesses. Again, it's applications, and it's going to be launched in September. Again, the team are taking early expressions of interest. All of these I can supply web links to at a later date. A little bit of a wild card next. Love your high street. East Riding have got a grant fund available for people that are in high street premises in the towns and villages across the East Riding, and the whole aim of it is to try and improve the quality of the property, improve the efficiency of the property, and improve the customer experience. So if you've got a property on the high street and you're looking to do some improvements in the East Riding area, then again, that's a great one to actually go for, to have a look at and see if you qualify. The next one is the Humber High Street Challenge Fund. This one's a little bit more targeted. If you're looking at it's got 4 key areas that it's looking to help, but again, it's designed to help people to improve properties, either if you're the freeholder or the leaseholder, to make the property more efficient, more enticing to your customers, and to improve the local area. The target areas are Whitefrigate in Hull City Centre, the Clock Tower region in Goole, the Casbah region of Grimsby, and all of Scunthorpe. So again, another great grant that business owners can access. And then the final one on my list there is the ICT Startup Grants. If you're a new business, you've been trading for less than 12 months, this grant is a straight £1,000 to help you buy technology to move your business forward. It could be anything from a laptop to an iPad to a mobile phone to paying for the broadband for your business, and any other technological innovation that I've missed in between all of those descriptions. It's only for startup businesses. They've got to be in the Humber region, less than 12 months old. It's a £1,000 grant, and the spend is you've got to spend £2,000 to £2,500 to qualify. And as with all of these, it's application first. If you go and buy any equipment or do any work on a premise before you apply for any of these grants, then you automatically rule yourself out from any sort of grant support. So if you're looking at doing any sort of project that might fit into one of these grants, then you need to either talk to myself or one of my colleagues on the team of advisors, and then we can help you, guide you to the right places, assist with any applications that need to be completed, but you have to do that ahead of any work or any purchases. If we can go on to the last screen, that should be. Hi Chloe, could we move on?
Oh yeah, I have pressed it. There we go.
Right, thank you. And my final one is just a thank you for the opportunity to tell you all about the a selection of the grants that we have available. In total, nationally, there's about 22 to 23,000 different grants and support schemes out there. So I've just picked a few that are local to the area that I think might be of benefit. But if your business hasn't got isn't affected by any of those, but you're looking for some help or support, my contact details are there. Give me a call, drop me a line, and we'll see what we can do to help.
That's great. Thank you, Andrew. I guess it's an ever-moving beast, isn't it, if that's the right phrase? I guess these projects are ending and new ones starting all the time. So I suppose the key is to perhaps sign up for your newsletters or watch your social media, etc. Would that be fair to say?
It be absolutely, yes. Since I put that slide deck together, there's been 3 or 4 more local ones that have been produced. There's a micro one for very small businesses. There's been one to support young entrepreneurs that has just been announced in the last 24 hours. So yes, Andy, it's yeah, sign up. If people would sign up to our newsletters, that is a great source of information because, as you say, it's an ever-moving beast.
Lots of great schemes on there, and I know lots of our clients have tapped into the the ICT ones, and the funding to help with business plans and growth, etc. So thank you for that, Andrew. Last but not least, we're going to move over to Tony, who's going to give us a really positive spin on his personal coronavirus experience, but also to talk about the importance of marketing and trying to grow your business during a downturn. So over to you, Tony.
Thank you, Andy. Firstly, thank you for inviting us on, Andy and Sean. Just looking at my slide there, it's more likely going to be a case study as to how it's affected me, my business, and also how I've adapted and changed and come through that, and also how I'm still improving going forward. So firstly, I run a business culture Hull, which for all intents and purposes is a networking group with a few more things added to it. So in terms of the way that it affected me, we currently have just under 200 local business members as part of the business culture Hull. And one of those features and benefits is to hold monthly networking events, your traditional networking events, a speaker, a venue, food, and so on. Now, the first three of this year, January, February, March, absolutely brilliant. 200 people at the KC Stadium, 150 at the Station Hotel. And then obviously the coronavirus hit. So it just basically wrote off the whole of the year in terms of my events that I had planned. I already had them planned. I had people, I had speakers, I had events, I had venues already booked up. The one for this month was supposed to be on the Pride of Hull. We had a speaker who was an ex-pilot who lost his arm in a crash, and then he built himself a bionic arm, and all the things he's done since then is absolutely unbelievable. But I've just simply had to write off the whole of this year for obvious reasons. Now that has affected me on an income point of view, because obviously the events themselves do earn money, sponsorship and attendances and so on. So that had a massive effect on my income. But because the business culture Hull is not just about networking, I didn't lose that many businesses and members. We lost a few from financial point of view, which you'd expect, and some, as the title said, just battened down. They closed the doors on everything from marketing. They cancelled all the direct debits. They wasn't sure what was going on and so on. So I lost a few that way as well. But since the last sort of 6 weeks, I've now gained another 15 members. So things are now starting to pick up. But we do other things alongside the networking, which is why we kept surviving. And then, unfortunately, on April Fool's Day, which wasn't an April Fool's Day for me, I got coronavirus and ended up in hospital for 8 days. But what that did for me was it gave me time to reflect. Although I was seriously ill on oxygen, I wasn't under intensive care, but I had oxygen. But I could actually think and work while I was in hospital, and I kept an eye on what was going on social media, LinkedIn, and so on. And it just astounded me that a lot of businesses that I know just simply didn't exist anymore. They'd stopped marketing themselves. They'd stopped posting on LinkedIn, social media. If you looked at their websites, there was no message to say what they were doing. They didn't divert their phones to an answering machine. They diverted them to home or to mobiles. They didn't get answered. So they just simply battened down. And it was a massive observation that I made while I was in hospital. And there was only a few people in the business sector world that actually started to shine through. And 360 was one of them that I noticed, and I've been saying to Andy and Sean all the way along, they were the only ones. There's probably one more accountancy firm out there as well that really did help and support everybody on LinkedIn. They waited up until gone 4 o'clock, and then they was pushing things out on social media, interpreting what the government was saying, and not just simply pointing you to long documents that you had to read yourself. They were interpreting them for you in plain English that that I needed definitely, and I know other people needed as well. So there were a few people that really shone through all of this, and a lot of business services seem to be the ones that came out better. The other ones just seem to just disappear altogether. And that to me was it's something which I don't think was, I don't think they should have done that. They should have, yes, if they've got outsourced marketing and they're looking at saving costs, they can clearly cut all that back if they need to, but then they can then take over. Andy and Sean took over, and 360 took over. And so doing that really, I think, really put them in a different light to everybody else. So one of the things there was, as I say, thinking about the marketing, thinking about what you're doing, continuing to do what you was doing, even more so now. A lot of people needed help and advice and support, and it wasn't there for them. So by putting things out publicly, even if it wasn't your clients that you was addressing, it still put them in a really good light. So while I was in hospital, that's what I actually noticed. And from my point of view, from my business point of view, I wasn't able to do a lot, but I outsourced at that point my marketing to someone that knows me very well and knows the way that I speak and knows my membership. So although I wasn't able to do anything, it seemed as though I was still doing everything, because this outsourced person was doing it for 2 weeks solid for me. And then when I came out, I was able to take back over again. So I was never out, I was never off social media. I was always contacting my clients still. And also you've got to rethink what you're doing. Yes, the physical networking events couldn't happen anymore, but now we're all doing things like this. We're all doing online Zoom meetings and events and so on. So I've now got about 6 different things that I run that are virtual, from member workshops to Ask the Expert, to motivational, to even to one-to-one speed networking, which we tried last week, which was absolutely brilliant. So we've got to start thinking of different things to do to re-engage with your clients. Now, one of the things that I did wrong, I assumed I knew what they wanted, and I was putting things on that I thought they needed. Now, it wasn't until I really thought about that I actually thought, well, actually, I don't even know what my members are going through, what their pain is at the moment, what do they want me to put on for them. So I did a survey, and I asked honestly, how has COVID affected your business financially, and how has COVID-19 affected your business, and how has it affected you personally? And that went out to all my members, 220 odd people. I also did the same survey to all of my contacts who were not members, which is about 300-400 of them, and the results were almost identical. And I'll just look at my sheet here. In terms of income, 65% of my members and my contacts had a reduction in income during the first 3 months of COVID. 15% had no change, and 15% had increased their income. And worryingly, and this is the sort of worrying part, 5% of business owners didn't even know if it affected them financially or not. I just don't get that, which means that they're not on top of their figures whatsoever, on top of their business whatsoever. So that was in terms of the income and how it affected those. Now, the other side of the coin was, what are their biggest challenges? And this was almost a third split. 30% said they're working on client retention. How can they retain their clients? Another 30% it was sales and marketing, and another 30% was health and well-being and mental health, which I didn't think would be that high. But I think it's already been mentioned today that a lot of people, when it first happened, it was new, they were adapting, the sun was out, most of them were getting paid to stay at home. It was almost like a holiday season for some of the employees, especially. But then after the 3rd and 4th month, it then became depressing. The cabin fever kicked in. They weren't sure if they're going to have work. So all of that meant the mental health, the time management, the separation from the home life to the work-life balance at home was becoming difficult. So now that I was able to look at those 3 things, I was then able to put on the right events for those things. So client retention, clearly how you contact your clients, how you talk to your clients. It's not about sales, it's about helping and supporting them. Marketing, continue to market. You might market in a different way, you might use different channels, but you've got to keep that going. And obviously health and well-being. We had health and well-being people on. talking about how to do time management, how to separate your home from your work and so on. So until I did that survey, I was just putting things on that I thought people wanted to hear, but I was sort of right, but there were things there that I didn't realise. So surveying your clients is a great way to understand their pain and what they're going through, and also a great way to offer you help and support. So that's what the survey brought to me. And then obviously just adapting and changing. We're all living in this virtual world now. I've had a chance to look at all my systems and processes, automation and streamline. And I think, like Sheila said, a lot of businesses now are realising that they can do things for less. So they're now realising that they don't need the premise. They've automated some of the systems, the processes. Do they really need the staff? Or do they really need the office space anymore? So business owners are going through this massive change as well. And I think you're going to see more people looking at automation and so on, and streamlining. So I do think, unfortunately, I think there'll be a lot more people being made redundant, because I think there's a lot of systems that have been put in place that actually can automate a lot of things at the moment. Yeah, so doing more marketing, adapting to different systems, processes and systems in the survey. And it's massively important to be seen by your members and by your clients. Even if you're just picking up the phone and just asking them how they are, you're not looking to sell them anything, or you shouldn't be. It's just about being there for them. And if you can help them, or you can point them in a different direction, then do that. And I can guarantee when you do that, when all this goes back to a normal, they'll come back to you. And I know, speaking to Sean, and the way they've been putting things out on social media and LinkedIn, they're getting a lot of clients coming through the door because of the way they've helped people. So that's really my case study, in the sense that, yes, I've gone through change, but luckily I had other things that were part of the club, not just the physical networking. I've now got a new website. Well, not a new website, it's a complimentary website all about Business Support Hull. So it's all of the support elements that I've built into the membership from March and April this year, that addition to just the networking itself. And I've continued to push on networking events, virtual, online stuff. And you've just got to adapt and go along. So the future for me now is, yes, I think these will carry on. The people are looking at getting back physically networking at the moment. That's what my members are telling me. I don't think it's responsible to put them on at the moment, but I think we will go back to physical networking, but I think it'll be next year now before that comes along. So I've just wrote off this year. But you've just got to engage with your clients, keep engaging, and just keep pushing forward. And there was a saying that I heard the other day was, if you're going through hell, keep going. And I think that's the way I look at things. You know, nothing gets me down from a mindset point of view. Even when I was in hospital, I knew I'd be all right. I knew I'd get out of this. I was already thinking about things to do while I was in hospital. I'd outsourced stuff, so I didn't have to worry about that. So yeah, this is what change I've gone through, and as I say, I'm getting new members now, so things are picking up, and the new websites come along. So yeah, I'm just pushing through all of this, and as I say, people like 360. You know, if we was all that way, I think it'd be a far better world to live in, because what they've been doing has been great, in terms of what they've been putting out there as well. So I'll finish on that note for 360. But yeah, so that's really my case study from March up until now.
Tony, thank you so much. That was a really interesting insight into your experiences, and also the way you've sort of adapted your business to cope. We have overrun slightly, but if anyone does have any questions, please put them on the chat and we'll do our very best to answer them. Tony, also thank you for the great feedback on 360 and our service to our clients during coronavirus. If I'm honest, we struggled a little bit to start with. We're getting so many questions and queries through all the different communication channels, and most of the questions we couldn't answer because the answers weren't there yet. You know, the government sometimes they were standing up 2 or 3 times a day and making all these announcements about this fantastic support that were going to be given to businesses and taxpayers, etc. But the actual detail didn't come out until 2 or 3 days later, and then you had to wait a few more weeks for the for the websites to open, the portals to be set up, etc. So, and also we were, we had the challenge of everybody working remotely, so how do we answer the phones, etc. So, from a very early stage, we sort of sat down virtually and said, how are we going to cope and manage all of these inquiries we're getting? And we realised that what we needed to do was gain the trust of our clients, that as soon as there was an answer, we would tell them about the bits that were relevant to them, the bits they needed to know. You don't need to ask us if there's an answer yet, because there isn't, but the second there is, you will be the first to know. We started supporting our live chat lines till 8 on an evening to sort of spread out the questions and queries we were getting. We were opening them on a weekend. We set up some WhatsApp support groups. We started doing daily updates, which you mentioned during your presentation. So, within a few days, we'd managed to nip it in the bud, gain the confidence of our clients. And then what they were doing is they were sort of sitting, waiting for us to talk to them, digesting it. And if they did have any queries on what we told them, then they were getting back to us and we were dealing with it appropriately. We also made a commitment from a very early stage to keep our team intact, fully trained, and to continue as normal as much as possible. And I think the team appreciated that. Most people don't want to be sat at home watching daytime TV. They want to be, testing themselves mentally. They want to be looking after the clients they've looked after for many years. And obviously the clients also appreciated that our team remained intact, so they didn't have to build up relationships with any new advisors, which perhaps isn't the case for some of the other accountants, solicitors, business advisors, etc. Looking back, now I realise how long all this has gone on for. Perhaps it was a little bit of a crazy decision to make, but I'm glad we did. All of the team are still, motivated and enjoying helping the clients, etc. So, I'm really proud of the way the whole team sort of responded to the challenge that was thrown at them, really. So yeah, that's just a little insight into the way we've had to adapt our business. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Sean. How are your clients finding the return to normality?
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag, Andy. I think the uncertainty is the biggest thing I think that everybody's experiencing. How things are coming back slowly. There's some signs. I mean, the Eat Out to Help Out scheme seems to have created a buzz, but some people are finding it struggling to cope with the 3 days that are like Christmas and 4 days that are like the desert. So that's been a challenge, I think, for people. But it does feel like there's things that are coming back and green shoots of recovery are out there. Yeah, I think I'll echo what you said about how we reacted and how proud we are of the team. What we tried to do is convey that it's not just about numbers for us, it's about relationships with clients. And I guess the biggest thing for us was how to help people who were scared. I mean, everybody didn't have an idea what was going on, how long this would carry on for. I think that was the biggest thing for me, was trying to give comfort where people, a crumb of comfort to people who were just worried about what was going on. So I think for us, the biggest thing about imparting knowledge and answering questions, I think it was just giving reassurance. I think is the main thing for us. But yeah, I mean, it's still a challenging environment out there. Hopefully we can push on through, like Tony's phrase, if you're in hell, keep going. So I think that's what's going to happen. It's going to have to happen at some point. And the support of the government's been...
I said going
hell,
through.
not
Yeah, not hell.
I said going
Yeah,
through hell.
yeah.
If you're going through hell, continue. Yeah. Sorry, that's
Yeah.
probably my dialect coming out there. Yeah. Yeah.
And the support that's out there, and the government support, and the things that Sheila's been doing and Andrew's been doing, and now Tony's really gone about changing the face of business support. It's not just networking, it's business support, and it's in its holistic sense. I think it's been testimony to the characters we've got in the city, and how we can adapt and move forward. So.
It's also one of the things I was again about businesses not adapting. I went to a wood yard a month ago when they just opened to get some wood on a Friday, just to do something in the garden, and there was a queue outside the wood yard, and it got to 12:30, and there was still possibly 10 or 15 people waiting to go into the wood yard itself. And the guy came out and said, "Sorry, but we shut at 12:30 on a Friday. Can you all come back tomorrow?" You just think, what the hell? What? You know what I mean? You've got all these people waiting because you always shut on a Friday at 12:30. You're not even going to let these people into bar. You've gone through this COVID-19 where you've had nothing through the door, and yet you still insist on shutting at 12:30 on a Friday because we've always done it. You're thinking, what the hell? What they're doing? Yeah. Just a bit of negativity there, lad, just to finish off with.
If any of the panelists or attendees do need to leave, then obviously more than welcome to, because we are overrunning slightly. Sheila, what do you think are the biggest challenges over the next few months? I guess it's pretty obvious in terms of furlough ending, getting people back to the office where appropriate, and you're going to be very busy, aren't you, Sheila?
Yeah, I do think that there's now a wave of change in the new sort of adjustments that are happening. I think that the mindset is now changing, that COVID is not going away, and so people are adapting more now. I think earlier on it was short-term thinking, but for me and my colleagues now, we're seeing that actually businesses are understanding that they need to think long-term and think and adapt to COVID being around for a long time now. And so now I think, understanding that, they're looking at the business in terms of that as well, and what they need to do to adjust to that. And a big part of that is the safe workplace, because the thought process to make people feel safe in the workplace is pivotal. I know obviously there are still a lot of people working from home, but there's a lot of businesses that can't work from home. But I think there is for us, our thoughts are that there is going to be a lot more redundancies yet to come once we get nearer to the expiry of the furlough, unfortunately. And obviously we would hope there isn't a second wave, but obviously the speculation doesn't help. And I think also businesses are putting a bit of a contingency together for that.
Yeah. Do you think that when people are looking for places to work, switch jobs, etc., do you think they'll start looking at a lot more at what the flexible working arrangements are, and how safe is the workplace from a COVID point of view? I think these are things they'll start thinking about, rather than the more traditional things like, I don't know, pay, hours of work, etc.
Yeah, I think the psychological contract will have a big impact. I think if employees don't start to, feel safe, I mean, we haven't post lockdown. It hasn't been a significant amount of time, but we've seen a large increase in the amount of whistleblowing claims. Now that means that the path of communication, that channel of communication, is breaking down with companies. That when an employee doesn't feel safe, if they're not getting anywhere inside the company, they've got now this, unfortunately, this pathway to report it, because it is in the public interest, because it could potentially bring the spread of COVID outside of the workplace. So it becomes a potential whistleblowing.
Yeah, and perhaps if people have come off furlough and they're not quite ready to come off furlough, it's maybe an opportunity for them to get back on furlough if they blow the whistle and health and safety come in and shut the warehouse down temporarily.
Yeah, let's be fair. We have, in my experience, more people on furlough just want to come back off furlough and back into work.
Yeah.
And there is a wave of employees that I think genuinely saying to employers, you're not doing enough, we don't feel safe. Health and safety is so paramount, we need to feel safe. I feel safe at home, but I'm in a bubble, and I can determine my own risks, and I can I'm starting to now think seriously about getting back out to clients, but I'm being very open and honest when I say that brings about a sense of nervousness. My first question to the client is, can you send me your risk assessment and safe working methods? That wouldn't have been heard of, would it? Sort of 4 or 5 months ago. So I want to be reassured that, not just from walking into the building, but from when I park up my car, I want to know, just because it's a manufacturing plant, I want to feel safe. Yeah.
Andrew, we haven't mentioned the B word yet. Is Brexit going to have much impact on the availability of grants, etc., going forwards, do you think, or will our government be able to find some more money on this money tree they seem to have found somewhere?
Well, that's a great question, Andy, and one that if I knew the answer to, it would be amazing to give everyone reassurance. Central government have said that they will honour any project that is currently running and is funded by Europe. So if any project loses its funding by us leaving the union, that they will step in and replace them. So I think that the money tree may still be available to continue, but it's a very interesting question and not one that's been asked by anybody up until lockdown. It was on everybody's lips. Then lockdown happened and the severity of COVID came to the fore, and nobody's really thought about Brexit anymore. It's I think the feeling now is that Brexit will happen. We will get through it. We will work it all out, and we will make sure that we continue to be successful. And government will continue to support various grant programs that it thinks will give value for money and help create jobs or keep people in the industries and sectors that are vital to the UK. So it's an interesting time, but I don't think that we'll see much change, other than everybody will continue to focus on helping businesses in every way that they can. As per Northern Powerhouse have now come to the fore with funding to start replacing European Union funding.
Right, thank you. I think it's probably time to wrap it up now. So massive thank you to our guest speakers, Tony, Andrew and Sheila. Really appreciate your input, the invaluable information that you've given us today. Thank you to all the attendees. We will be sending this video out to anybody who signed up to the webinar but couldn't make it. If anybody wants to get in touch with any of the speakers, including those from outside of 360, please email help@360accountants.co.uk and we will put you in touch with them. I think that's it. So thanks everyone, and keep an eye out on social media for details of our next webinar, which will be sometime during September. And if anybody has any ideas about the topics they'd like to see being explored, then again, please get in touch. Thanks everyone.
Cheers now.
Thanks everyone.
You all, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.